Glad to be here. Been here for a few days, having a chance to take a look at the improvements to the Coliseum, which is very impressive. Getting a lot of nice feedback, and I know fans are happy. There's a lot for a lot of different types of fans here at the new Coliseum. Had a chance also to meet with new president Folt and interim athletics director Dave Roberts. While I was here as well, I'll have a chance to check out the basketball team tomorrow as well. So a lot of great things happening on the campus here today, and of course an exciting game. A lot of talent on the field tonight. Pac-12 championship implications, playoff implications. It's been a fun season so far for the Pac-12, and a lot going on not just in our league but nationally. Happy to answer any questions you have about either of those things.
Larry, you'd indicated back in August that the outside capital discussions that there would be a finality by the end of the calendar year. Maybe even the Pac-12 championship game is only a month away. Is there a determination there yet?
I still think we'll probably have news by then. I don't think we have an exact deadline on it. We've got another board meeting coming up in a few months. We continue the exploration. Whether we do something short term or it's just informative and educational for our presidents and ADs and us as we get ready for 23, 24, we'll see. But it's a very dynamic market. There's a lot of change going on, a lot of new players in the television space, and this exploration's been very helpful just to see the interest.
Speaking of change, State of California actually had the bill as far as getting student athletes paid off their likeness. You kind of came out and were against it at first, and then now the NCAA has come and supported it somewhat. Has your stance changed at all? And if so, where does this take the Pac-12 moving forward with this bill?
Yeah, no, we're supportive of what the NCAA's exploration. We've had a representative on the NIL working group of the NCAA. We're opposed to a state-by-state approach. And a lot of unintended consequences and loopholes in what California had proposed. So we're very supportive of not only the work the NCAA is doing, but trying to find a national solution. And Pac-12 will be very engaged in that process. Try to find ways for student athletes to benefit from their name, image, and likeness. It's clear that there's a strong desire from that. A lot of people speaking up for that, and try to figure out a way to do that consistent with the collegiate model, supporting the primacy of the academic mission of students, understanding the recruiting environment, and what makes college sports different and special from pro sports and from the Olympic movement. I think that's the challenge. Won't be easy, but we're going to really lock in. We're going to have a working group we're in the process of putting together that's going to include a broad array of campus leadership. It's going to be very important for us to get the student athlete perspective on this, which we've already started doing. I've met with a dozen of our student athlete leaders from all 12 of our campuses already, and that's a process that's going to continue. I think the NCAA's targeted April to kind of get concrete proposals together. And in the process, we're going to work really closely with our peer conferences. And I think it's probably going to be important to engage federal legislators and members of Congress in some solutions. If name, image, and likeness is something that can be implemented and still preserve the collegiate model, and it can be enforced, without the loopholes. I think all of us know are there around recruiting and other things. It, might require law changes and some other support from Congress.
What kind of feedback have you gotten from the student athletes you've talked to?
So mixed. There's a lot of different views about this, and I've spoken about this topic over several years to student athletes. But most support the idea of being students first. Realize there are a lot of benefits that they get that don't often get talked about, don't often get reported. The value of a scholarship and the other support that student athletes get, and some are really supportive of this exploration that we're going through. So, one of the things I've learned pretty quickly in this role, you can't generalize. Student athletes feel this way or feel that way. They're individuals, a lot of different types, depends on their perspective. But I think the recent meeting I had with representatives from each of our 12 school student athlete leaders, they feel it's something that should be explored, that the California approach is not the right approach, and that we've got to come up with more thoughtful solutions.
You talk about the college model. Everybody else seems to get paid, but these college athletes put their blood, sweat, and tears on the line. Are you in favor of supporting student athletes getting paid, and are you on a committee? Are you part of a plan, long-term plan, as far as just collaborating with other states and conferences?
Yeah, the Pac-12 is very supportive of the work that the NCAA NIL committee's done. We had a representative, athletics director from Colorado, Rick George. We've got a representative on the board of directors of the NCAA, Chancellor Phil DeStefano from Colorado, who endorsed this. So we're supporting the process. We believe in the collegiate model. We believe it should be students first. Don't believe It should be an open market where student athletes are being paid to go to this school or that school or for their performance. But the idea of name, image, and likeness, if we can craft reasonable guardrails around it really just being about that, and student athletes that have a value based on their individual popularity, if we can craft that, that's something we're supporting, and we're going to engage in trying to figure out how to focus it on just that.
All right, the men's basketball season's about to start, and going back to the spring, you would say we're hoping for finality. While the federal investigations are over, those cases are over, there's still no answers. You've got multiple programs tied up in this, including here, but Arizona, you're about to start another season. We're about to go through a third year, again, with uncertainty and clouds over across the country, but multiple schools in your conference. We're about to go through a third one.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating for us. I've met with our coaches recently at our men's basketball media day, and they expressed their frustration to me. I think we all want some clarity and finality to it. I'm also sensitive to some of the challenges the NCAA has had, given the cooperation or lack thereof that they've gotten from the FBI and Department of Justice. But yeah, we want this cloud lifted, and if there are outcomes or penalties that need to rise from it, everyone wants to kind of get on with that and move forward. I think it's going to be a great year for our league. We want to focus on the court. I think we're deeper, we're stronger. It's going to be a very interesting season for us. I think the conference is on the rise. But yeah, this cloud hanging out there and what ifs in terms of what might happen to certain programs, it's not a healthy thing.
Are you confident, though, that now that those investigations are over, that Arizona and USC specifically, as institutions, are you confident in their own internal investigations now that they're free to do them more so than they were?
Well, I've had a chance to speak to our leadership at our schools that have been implicated in this, very confident in the seriousness with which they've treated this, the money they've spent, bringing in outside lawyers and investigators, and they've done everything reasonable you could do to try to get to the bottom of it. The ball's in the court of the NCAA to move through their enforcement process.
Is there any more consideration to 8-game schedule in football, conference schedule, given that I think 3 of the 5 Power 5 are doing that?
Yeah. Well, I think 2 of the 5 are doing 8-game. I think there are 3, the Big 12, the Big 10, and the Pac-12, that are 9-game conference schedules. There won't be any serious consideration about any change until the lead up to our next round of television agreements. It's something we committed to as part of our television agreements with ESPN and Fox. So really would be quite difficult to make a change to that, and there's really no momentum for a change right now. Also, by then, I think we'll have some more data in terms of how the college football playoff has worked. I think there have been certain years you could argue the extra conference game hurts. Certain years you could argue the extra conference game has helped for us. So I think open question going forward. We'll look at a lot of different things in the lead up to our next round of TV agreements, but don't expect any change to that between now and then.
The Pac-12 has moved, championship game, I should say, has moved to Las Vegas for the next couple of years. Has there been any talk with the Inglewood Stadium opening up soon, possibly rotating the Pac-12 between Vegas and LA or possibly Santa Clara?
Yeah, well, we've had a great experience in Santa Clara, like the 49ers, continue to have a bowl game there. We've looked really carefully at what the Rams and Inglewood are doing in Las Vegas and decided that the next couple of years we want to play our championship game with the Raiders, a new facility in Las Vegas. Although we have added a bowl game in Inglewood, and that'll give us a good opportunity to experience that. The college football championship game is also coming to Los Angeles at the new Raiders Stadium, 2023, I believe. So it's clearly a world-class venue. I mean, we're quite fortunate over the last few years. We've had these amazing new football stadia built in our footprint, and it's opened up all kinds of opportunities. I mean, this bowl game we're going to play in Las Vegas is going to rotate between Pac-12 SEC, Pac-12 Big Ten. This is the first time the SEC's played a bowl game west of the Mississippi. So it's a good example of how these new facilities are now in great markets, are an attraction and going to allow us to improve our bowl lineup and move around our championship games.
Given the power of USC's brand, how important is it for them to get this athletic director hire right?
USC, doing well is great for the league overall. They're probably our most historic, prominent football brand. So it's in everyone's interest in our league for them to be operating well and be successful. And I had a chance to meet with Dr. Folt yesterday, and confident that we're going to wind up with a really strong athletics director hire.
What are you looking for first playoff committee rankings Tuesday night? You guys could have, depending on the result of this game, 2 teams very highly ranked.
Yeah.
What are you looking to see in terms of how they evaluate those teams after, obviously, I know you guys last year weren't thrilled with the way they looked at Washington State.
Yeah, well, There's a lot of football left to play. We try not to overreact to the first committee ranking, although I think certainly Utah having won today, and we'll see what the outcome of this game is, but Oregon thus far really, I think, distinguished themselves as strong teams. We had a chance to have our first discussion with members of the committee this week. As the commissioner with my team, we have a chance 4 times during the season to talk to the committee, and I think people nationally are very impressed. Those 2 teams as possible playoff contenders, depending on what happens, and there's a lot of attention on what's happening today. Typically, what I've seen, at least in the early rankings, is Pac-12 teams tend to trend a little bit higher, a little bit better than they do, say, in the AP or the coaches poll, given the criteria that they look at, and they're watching all the games. And I think our conference has been deep this year. I think at one stage, well, we've had at least 6 teams in the AP Top 25 at different stages. Sorry, 8 teams in the AP Top 25 at different stages of the season. So I think people recognize our conference is deeper, better, stronger. Open question whether we're going to have elite teams. But getting through the Pac-12 conference season, with 1 loss, which Utah and Oregon still have the possibility to do, I think is an incredible challenge. And if a team is able to come through with 1 loss and win a championship game, I think they'll have a very strong case for playoff.
With the conference title game moving to Vegas, Larry, is Football Media Day also moving to Las Vegas?
We're talking about that. We haven't decided. LA's worked well for us over the years, and I know our team's talking about that right now.
You're here a little bit as a parent, a little bit as a commissioner. What's that like for you?
Well, it's great. I mean, I think I've become a better commissioner now. I have teenage kids. I've got a student here, and I've got 2 high school student athletes going through a recruiting process. So it's certainly given me a deeper appreciation for what our student athletes go through, not only when they're at our universities, but in the lead up, what the recruiting process is like, and the pressures and the challenges, and more sympathy for our coaches and what they've got to go through in managing the recruiting process.
What's that going to be like when a coach comes into the home to recruit the daughter of the commissioner? What's that going to be like?
That coach is going to get grilled.
On the equivalency proposal, the SEC was talking about this, you just mentioned about recruiting and those things. So what is your latest understanding of it? Because it's obviously not formulated yet,
Yes.
but where do things stand where it could mean $20 and $30 million?
So we have started to have a conversation about that since I think I talked to you last week. Been together with the other commissioners, and a lot of complications involved in that. I think may get sidetracked a little bit by all this discussion about NIL. I think there are some maybe more challenging, bigger picture issues we're going to have to wrestle with as part of that. But the highest priority, I think, over the next 6 months legislatively will be taking the challenge the NCAA Board of Governors has given us and trying to figure out is there a pathway to allow NIL, allow student athletes to get compensated for name, image, and likeness and still preserve the model. So I actually think this other topic probably isn't going to get a lot of attention in the next 6 months.
Fans are frustrated with the officiating again. What's your evaluation at this point? How are the officials doing?
I think our officials are working on constant improvement. I think there have been improvements. The recommendation of the Simpson report that we distributed to everyone are being carried out, and it's led to different procedures and policies and some more transparency. Certainly, a different kind of focus, increased focus on some of the training and accountability. So I don't know that I could say anything was going to dramatically change overnight. I think the program was considered to be solid, comparable with peer conferences, but significant room for improvement. And the improvements are not going to happen overnight. They're going to take some time, but I feel good that they're pointed in the right direction. That doesn't mean on any given game there aren't going to be mistakes. There's not going to be controversies. Fans aren't going to be upset. I think it does go with the territory, and that's not meant to suggest there's any complacency. We always have to work on improving, but what I can tell you is there's a very serious commitment to improving officiating, making it as good as it can be, and putting the resources in it necessary to make that happen.
It seems like the SEC has been more transparent, though, in its approach so far this season. When you have a game, and it's not about one call, I understand that, but when last week in the Oregon game you have a pass interference call that draws then an unsportsmanlike on the bench, that they then get rid of the pass interference, which prompted the unsportsmanlike in the first place. Should there not be some level of transparency for the fans, for the programs publicly? Because that call was clearly wrong. It was overridden by that crew, but the subsequent call was because of the wrongness of the first call.
So we've taken a step toward more transparency. I think most of you are aware we really didn't comment publicly in the past. Based on the recommendations from the Simpson report and discussions with our athletics directors, we decided to take a step, but in the first year not go too far and have officiating be the main focus. But we established a protocol, and if there are certain triggers, David Coleman will make the judgment every week about publicly commenting and maybe putting together a video. It's happened twice so far this season. We've had some dialogue about some of the other calls, and we've had some vigorous debate about whether those should have been communicated publicly or not. And I discussed it with our athletics directors recently, and what there was a consensus around was, let's stick with the protocol we agreed to for this season, but at the end of the year, let's take a step back, look at it all, and maybe modify, maybe take the next step in terms of even more transparency. So there may be some calls that we didn't comment on this year that people in the rearview mirror will say maybe we should have, and we might make some adjustments for next year, but we've taken a step.
I'll take one more
There
question.
hasn't been a single comment from a Pac-12 game this season. I think that's the concern, but the crews have made mistakes. And so when you
Yes.
say there's transparency, I think people expect, what were those mistakes? What could you do better?
Yes, I can tell you, because now I sit through a review every single week with David Coleman, the head of our officiating, and I can tell you there are a significant number of mistakes every week. The agreed protocol for when we're going to say something publicly about it and put out a statement is if there's a game-ending situation where the call had a significant impact on it, a significant error in mechanics, interpretation of the rules. Some of those things are subjective, but David has not looked through the lens of whether it's a conference game or a non-conference game. This has just been his judgment following the protocol, but as I said, we're very open to reviewing the protocol and maybe going even further next year.